Hi, I'm Greg Moore, and I am a AI expert prompt engineer, and I've been doing AI for a really long time. So what I'm going to show you today is all about how to get started with using a large language model. We're going to be using Google Gemini today, and I'm just going to show you the absolute basics. If you've never opened up Google Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, or any of these AI models before, this is the video for you. Now, I want to express my gratitude for joining me on this. I realize there's a lot of videos out there that you could be watching, so thanks for stumbling on this one. Okay, so what I want to get across right up front is that when you open up any one of these AI tools, what you're really interfacing with is what's called a large language model, or we sometimes call these LLMs. Now, why is that important? AI is a very large umbrella that can come to mean a lot of different things. It can mean large language models, it can mean video rendering models, it can mean audio processing models. There are so many different artificial intelligence models out there and methodologies that you could spend an eternity trying to understand and aggregate all of the different ways that you could be interfacing with AI. So today I'm just going to focus specifically in the large language model that is Google Gemini, and we're going to go through with some pretty easy and accessible demonstrations here. Now, I would encourage you to follow along at home and you walk through this with me. Everything I'm going to show you here today, you can do with a free account. You do not need a paid account to do any of this in 2026. So let's get started with what I think is probably the easiest way to learn how to use a large language model effectively. Okay, so let's start out with what a large language model and more importantly, what it is we're going to use it for, what it is and what we're going to use it for. So AI, or large language models in this case, are nothing more than sophisticated autocomplete. They're not a thinking being. Every time you type in something, it is going to predict the next letter it's going to respond to you with, the next word it's going to respond to you with, and that's as far as it has thought. It's just generating as it goes along the various different bits of text. So when you watch the work that it's going to do when we start to talk to it, we're not actually talking to it. We are merely giving it prompts that it's going to do its best job to autocomplete the answer to. So this is based on its training, its ability to look things up on the internet, and a variety of other things that I won't have time to get into today, but are absolutely influencing what you see on your screen whenever you do a prompt in a large language model. So let's get started with a really interesting and simple prompt, okay? How do I can peaches? Now, when I ask this question, Gemini is going to come back and it's going to give me a pretty interesting response. And as you might imagine, the response is going to be really about taking what it knows about canning, all right, built into its model, its training. It's been trained on a certain amount of information that it got from the internet at one point in time. And then it's going to give us the best answer it can give us. And it's going to make a lot of assumptions about what it is that we want to know about specifically, right? So this is going to be a response that is taking into account some possibly thought that maybe we want to actually can peaches ourselves. It's not assuming that we necessarily have already done it. It's assuming that because we're asking about it, we haven't done it yet. The thing that you need to keep in mind is that by default, when you ask questions, very simple questions like, how do I can peaches? These LLMs are going to make a lot of assumptions about what you want to know about. So it's going to basically create a statistically probable response based on what it knows about what people are generally doing and what it's trained on and how it knows to respond to these things. Now, the most common thing, or I should say the most common way that an LLM will respond to you is as a helpful assistant. That means that it's going to come back with an answer trying to be helpful. Now, as we'll get into a little bit later, you'll see that we can circumvent that a little bit and we can help it fine-tune how to give us answers that aren't necessarily helpful assistant, but can have other personas behind them. So to start out with this one, we've got a pretty good answer here, right? We've got an answer that tells us exactly what we would need to do. It made a lot of assumptions. It even warned us a critical safety note. If you're to only use yellow flesh peaches, and that white flesh peaches are often too low in acidity to be safely canned at home and should be frozen instead. This is part of the model training. This is something that the Google has injected in here, either through the model training or as guardrails to kind of help provide a an experience that is tuned to what it's assuming. And that is that maybe we're probably not food safety experts. Again, we need to give Google a little bit more context around what we expect out of it in order to get a better response. But to start with, this isn't bad. This is actually a pretty good response. And what you'll probably notice going into 2026 is that these responses are going to get even better when you provide just a simple prompt such as, how do I can peaches? So this was kind of what we refer to as a zero-shot prompt, meaning that we gave it one question and it gave us an answer. Now, the quality of that answer is, again, very much tuned to the defaults of the model. It is not necessarily in depth, and it doesn't know anything about us at this point and what we need. So it's a generic response. It's going to miss critical safety steps. Like, for example, I don't see anything in here that tells you should probably be really careful if you're processing with boiling water, and boiling water can burn you. It just made some assumptions that we probably know that. So this might also include incomplete information. You might not know where the canner is. You might need a little bit more help on that. Whatever the case is, it's, again, made some assumptions. So this is a good place to start. And honestly, this is where I see a lot of people also get incredibly frustrated with the answers that they're getting back, because it has made assumptions that aren't accurate. So while the large language model is going to fill in the gaps with guesses when you don't provide context, we actually can provide it more context to help it understand what we're after. So what was missing from that original prompt? Well, we didn't give it any information about our skill level with canning. We haven't told it whether we've done this before. Do we even know what the equipment is that it's talking about? Are we even familiar with food safety basics? So generic answers can oftentimes just be wrong. And in this case, it could even be dangerous. Now, we want to make sure we're watching for things like what assumptions is being made, including things like skipping safety steps, no mention of botulism risk anywhere here, right? I didn't see botulism anywhere mentioned in this. And vague temperature times, right? I mean, we got pretty good. It's talking about sterilizing. It did get into a little bit of information about how long you should process, elevation, but it didn't tell us much more after that. So we need to be incredibly vulnerable to the LLMs to express what our limitations are and what we do actually know. So this comes into kind of the next step to get a better version of this prompt here, or get a better answer from a similar prompt. So in the same mode of thinking, how do I can peaches? We now want to give it a little bit more information about what do we know about canning. So in this version, I'm just going to say, great, how do I can peaches? If you're not completely certain about any safety information, clearly state, I'm not certain about this, rather than guessing. So when we do this, it's going to give us a significantly different answer. And hopefully what we'll get instead is a little bit more information that kind of lets us on to, hey, this is following the USDA National Canning Center for Home Food Preservation Standards. Do not use the, because it goes into a little more depth here about the yellow peaches only warning. It's going to give us a little bit more information, and it's going to be a lot more specific. So syrup options here for the preparation. It's actually giving us a recipe for some known different formulations. And you'll notice that next to these, we've got a link. And these links link out to where it got this information from. Now, this is a fairly new feature that is common in Gemini, ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, some of these other frontier models, where they'll provide you with this hyperlink so you can go out and kind of check its sources. This is a good sign. This is a sign that we've given it enough of a prompt to know that, hey, you need to go out and check your assumptions. And if you look back in the original prompt we gave it, clearly state I'm not certain about this rather than guessing. It's come back with that in knowing that we're expecting a high level of accuracy and providing us with these hyperlinks instead. So we're getting much, much more cautious responses. All the caveats are starting to come out. The links to all of the sources that it is used. And here we can start to see where large language models indeed use their training to answer these questions, but they also use internet searches and they also use internet-based information that it has been deemed trustworthy, or at least to it, that it can use in order to answer your questions. So just by changing the prompt ever so slightly to really challenge it, if you're not completely certain about any safety information, we have essentially told it, hey, we're going to check your work, so please be thorough. Now, there are some different ways you can go about doing this, but what we've done here is a great starting point. So we are going to get fewer statements that it's uncertain about, and as a result, we've got lots of good references, etc. And sometimes large language models these days, because they do have programming in them to try and be that helpful assistant, will even suggest a next step. And this can be both helpful and not so helpful. And again, we'll get to this in another video on how to circumvent some of this over helpfulness and get the answers back to a level of being more truly helpful and kind of knowing when to stop asking you questions. All right, so this gives us, again, just a technique that works for any topic to say, hey, check your work. Be sure if you're uncertain about anything, let me know. So the next thing I want to talk a little bit about is we want to eliminate a little bit of the guesswork. So again, we haven't given it too much context. We've told it that we're really interested about safety, but we haven't told it about what equipment we have, what sort of concerns specifically we have about food safety. This will actually change its answer. The more that context we can give it around our question, the better it becomes to answering those questions. So I'm going to go ahead and start a new chat, and I'm just going to go ahead and give it an updated version of the same question. I want to learn how to can peaches at home. I've never canned anything before. I have basic kitchen equipment, pots and jars, but no specialized canning equipment yet. I'm concerned about food safety, and I want to make sure I don't make anyone sick. What do I need to know? So when we plug that in, we're going to get an entirely different answer. We're going to get an answer that backs up quite a bit and tells us a little bit to say, hey, it's completely possible to safely can peaches. Don't worry. Before, it just assumed that we knew that this is going to be safe if we do it right. But now it's going to give us some reassurances. Again, because we have given it some more context that says, I've never canned anything before. So it's going to come back and say, great, here's how I can help you. So we have got now a list of equipment we need. Again, we didn't get this the first time because we didn't give it enough context to know, hey, this is all we've got. So it's giving us a heads up on all the things we're going to need that we haven't already mentioned. We told it we got pots and jars, but we didn't tell it what kind of pot we have, because we're going to need a deep stock pot, a rack, mason jars, not just any jar, but mason jars with the 2-piece lids, and a jar lifter, so on and so forth. It's going to get really specific. And again, it comes back and telling us about choosing the right peaches, gives us that yellow peaches, white peaches, low acid warning. And then also adds this maturity pit. This is nice. Looking for freestone peaches. This is going to make it much easier. This is great. It has picked up on the fact that we've never canned anything before, so we probably don't know this. So again, it's giving us a much more thorough answer, safety golden rules, getting really in depth, step-by-step overview, going super in depth, not as in depth as the original answers came in at. So this is super tailored response for beginners because we've told it we're a beginner. I've never canned anything before. And it mentions these specific equipment needs. It emphasizes the safety prominently and acknowledges your starting point. This is so important when you are when you're starting out on something that is a topic you don't know much about. You need to let the LLM know, I don't know anything about this. Where do I start? This is way more helpful than coming in overly confident and saying, I just need to know how to can peaches. That's going to have it make a lot of assumptions. Again, be open and vulnerable about where you are at. So we can take this yet another step. We can tell the LLM, as I was mentioning before, kind of hinting to before, right now it has been working as a helpful assistant because that's what all LLM frontier models right now in 2026 are defaulting to, a helpful assistant. But what if we want it to be a little bit more pragmatic, right? We want it to come into this thing saying, giving us advice that we would expect from a human that has the same knowledge, the same skill. So in this version, what we're going to do is we're actually going to tell it what its persona is. So we're going to tell it, hey, you're a certified master food preserver with 20 years experience teaching home canning safety. I want to learn how to can peaches at home. Notice how different that is from the last few prompts that we gave it. We are now telling it what we want it to masquerade as. If it were a human being, what's its personality? This is a great way to take advantage of the training this model has in different personas and being able to piece together hypothetical personas even to provide you with information that would be contextually consistent with what that persona would provide you with. So, and we're coming to it with our ask of that persona. I want to learn how to can peaches at home. This is very different than how do I can peaches because we have started with a persona that is a teacher, and now we're telling it what we'd like it to teach us, what our outcome is. I want to learn how to can peaches at home. All right, and then we get back into the same thing that we provided before. I've never canned anything before. I have basic kitchen equipment, but no specialized canning equipment yet. I'm concerned about food safety. What do I need to know? Now, watch what happens when we give this prompt. Hello, it's wonderful to meet you. As someone who spent 2 decades teaching the art and science of home canning, I can tell you that peaches are a perfect gateway fruit for a beginner. Notice how the tone has changed entirely. Okay, at this point, the large language model has put itself into the shoes of a master food preserver with 20 years of experience and is talking to you as that persona. Why is that important? This helps the large language model really draw upon the knowledge that it has both in the model as well as what to go out and look for when it's doing its lookup on the internet to get its references and anything else to give you a really solid answer that goes beyond just the basic, here's how to can peaches. So it's going to talk to you more like an instructor. So we come down a little bit more. I hear your concern about food safety, and honestly, that's exactly what I want to hear from a new canner. Great, we are asking the right questions. Safety in canning isn't about luck, it's about following tested science-based recipes, and notice how it bolded that. All right, and then we get into some teaching. So it's going to start off and it's going to play teacher. It is actually teaching us now because we have told it we would like you to be our teacher. And it's going to be very detail oriented, and it's going to come in with the teacher teaching someone with a beginner's mindset to can. So we've got equipment, what you have versus what you need. This is a great chart here that it's come up with. It's telling us, the pot, can I use what I have? Maybe. And here's some notes on how to determine that. As we go on, the basic process for peaches, it walks you through it, how to know if it's safe, and so on and so forth. And you'll notice that as we go along, there's lots of links to various different resources where it got this information. This is a fantastic method. You can use this method of giving the large language model a persona to operate within as a method for doing all sorts of stuff. It's not just be the teacher. You can do things like you are a software analyst with 30 years experience in finance. I want your opinion on this thing right here. And it's going to think like a financial analyst. The sky's the limit when it comes to personas. Okay, so with a good persona under the way, we got to start to thinking a little bit more about safety and ethics here for just a minute. I just want to take a second to just talk a little bit about some of the things you might be thinking about doing with a large language model. It is very powerful, and the answers that it's going to give you are going to seem incredibly confident and are going to have, again, that edge of having looked things up if we prompted it to do so. Talking like a teacher, there's a certain authority that comes along with that we as humans respond really well to. But it's really important to remember that this is still a computer program. This is not a human being. It doesn't have databases of information that it have been pre-screened to tell you are okay. This is a probabilistic computer software component. It is not deterministic. What do I mean by probabilistic and deterministic? Probabilistic means that it's going to make some guesses and it's going to make a best effort, right? So instead of reading a script, it's reasoning through it, or in this case, it is being predictive. Remember, it's autocomplete on steroids. It is not actual intelligence. It's artificial. It just looks like it's intelligent. It just has a very smart program under the hood that tells it what the next letter, what the next word is going to be. And then it considers that whole sequence before it gives you the next word. Okay? So now that we've got that underway, there's a couple things we have to take into consideration, knowing that it doesn't actually have real intelligence. Some guide rails that we need to have in place so that we are being safe with it and it is not telling us information that we might misunderstand, use incorrectly, and could potentially do some harm. So first off, you can never rely solely on AI or any large language model for that matter for any sort of medical diagnosis or treatment, legal advice, financial decisions, emergency situations. You never want to leverage AI to answer a question that you're going to action on right away. You want to use it as a thought partner, right? You want to use it as a way to figure things out that are not high stakes. Things that are high stakes, you should probably still involve humans, right? You should still hire that attorney. You should still go see that doctor. You should still see that financial advisor. Don't trust AI to make those decisions for you. So you could think of the AI, again, as a thinking partner, as a coach. They're going to get some things wrong, and it's really up to you to use your judgment to determine where you are comfortable taking the AI's advice versus doing some of your own research or hiring a professional. So, food safety is borderline here, and this is part of the reason I chose this example. We're going to use AI to learn, and then once we're done learning, we've gotten all this information, before we go to can anything, we're going to actually check with the authoritative sources to make sure that it's right. We're going to go to the USDA Extension Services and validate it. Once we have validated what the AI has told us, we're probably in pretty good shape to go ahead and can those peaches with the instructions, particularly if they line up with what the canning books say we can do safely. So then that begs the question, why even use this at all? Why not just go get a book and learn how to do this? Well, with some things, that probably is the right answer. But what you'll find increasingly is that you can use AI to get you most of the way there, to build the context around how to think about something, to do a job for you that you might not be able to do as quickly, where it's faster for you to check the work that an LLM or some sort of AI bot has done for you than it is for you to create it from scratch or to research it from scratch. It's going to do a pretty good job of locating all the information that it needs in order to do the job that you've asked it to do. So again, if the cost of being wrong is very high, you're going to want to verify it with the human experts, or at the very least with the authoritative sources. Now, because AI doesn't understand consequences either, you've got to think of AI as preliminary research, not a final authority. Remember that those personas can also be used poorly. We could give it a persona of a psychopathic serial killer, and it would tell you to do horrible things potentially. Although hopefully there's some guardrails in place to prevent that from happening. But you see what I'm saying? We are going to want to retain our own agency at all times around anything that a large language model, or any AI for that matter, provides us with. Okay, so now I want to give you some examples here of what I'm talking about, of things you probably don't want to do. Giving it a picture of some canning that you did and say, is this food still safe to eat? It's not going to be able to tell you. It doesn't have the sensors or the abilities or the training on how to do that. You need to ask an expert, or you need to look up from the experts how you can discern that yourself. Diagnose these symptoms, and you give it all your medical symptoms. I'm coughing, I'm feeling horrible. Never do that, okay? You always go see a doctor for that. And then finally, I want to tell you a couple things you can do, because these are low cost of being wrong. Help me understand common canning mistakes. That's pretty easy to do. That's well documented. It's going to give you everything that it can find within reason about common canning mistakes. Create a study guide for my math test. If you give it information about what you're studying, more specifics, you can have it create a study guide that's probably going to be pretty helpful. It might lead you down past some stuff that's not going to be on the test, but how is it to know that? See what I'm saying? So you can use it for these things that aren't necessarily, life and death situations, and it's probably going to be okay. Okay, so one of the leads I've been bearing this entire time is this idea of not only are we telling it what persona to adopt, what we're trying to learn, but now some output requirements, right? So far it's been doing a pretty good job of giving us a narrative, and you'll notice it's tried to format some things in like a table format, but ultimately we want to be really specific about exactly what we want out of it. Now, this is where you can get pretty creative, and you can start to think like a director, right? Maybe like of a newspaper or something, where you're giving them an assignment. You're a certified master food preserver, 20 years experience. I want to learn how to can peaches from home. I've never canned anything before. Provide your response as 1, equipment needed in a bulleted list. 2, step-by-step process, numbered 1 paragraph per step. Step 3, safety warnings, separate highlighted sections. And then 4, total time estimate. Keep the entire response under 400 words. And when we submit that prompt, it's going to do exactly that. It's going to give us those sections. There's our equipment needed, our step-by-step process, our safety warnings, and our total time estimate. And if we were to go back through and count the words, it's going to be within 400 words, just like we asked it to. So why is this important? Well, we can get really structured with our responses in terms of how we want it to respond to us to match a specification. So for example, if we were thinking about printing this, because we've gotten pretty good at this and we want to just have kind of a reminder, this is a pretty good thing that we could print out and put in our book. And our current moment, perhaps, of skill and ability, this might be all we need to safely can peaches. I might not want to give this to a beginner because they would benefit from something more like some training or some learning that's actually structured to help them understand how to actually can peaches. Whereas this is more of a reminder. Okay. So, highly structured responses that match your specification are a great way to put AI to work, not only doing the work of researching the thing, putting it into a format, but truly putting it into an output that you can use for your use case. Another way I like to use this, if we're looking at different use cases, is let's say I'm having the LLM go out and research the weather patterns for the last 90 days, and I want it to give me a table of daily temperatures, highs and lows, rain counts, all these things, and then one row per day. It's going to do exactly that. And I can take that, put it in a spreadsheet, and I can start to actually take it and do more work with it, or give it back to the large language model to have it do some more work with it. The point is that it does have the ability to format things. And as time goes on, particularly going into 2026, it's going to be able to format things in ways that we haven't even thought of yet. Okay, so finally, I want to talk about we've been doing one-shot examples this entire time, right? So we've been talking about, we've been giving the LLM one prompt, and then we've been telling it to essentially answer one question, and it's done that. So now we're going to do what's called a few-shot prompt. So in this example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a very similar prompt as before. You are a certified master food preserver, so on and so forth. I'm learning to can peaches at home. Complete beginner. I want equipment recommendations in this format. So again, we're going back to that format we want, and we're telling it we want water bath canner, or an example. We're giving it some examples here, right? Example for tomato canning. Water bath canner, $40, $60, essential, available hardware stores. We're kind of giving it the format we want it to put it in using examples, right? Now, provide the same format for peach canning equipment. List 5 essential items. So what have we done here? We have given it some examples of different ways that we want it to represent data that we want to find out using relatable examples. So in the case of the water bath canner and the jar lifter, these are equipment that we know. Now we're asking basically to give us the same format for peach canning equipment. So we do this, and this goes out and does exactly that. It gives us in that exact same format. Here we go. Glass canning jars, $12 to $18 per dozen, essential, so on and so forth. It has given us the answer exactly in the format we've asked. It's even given us a pro tip at the end. So the response mirrors your example format exactly, right? So the examples show the LLM rather than tell the LLM. This is really handy when you want to say, I want to make something like this. You give it an example, but for this. The few shot approach works really well for this because you're giving it those examples. They're generally smart enough to be able to interpret what you mean by that, especially with the modern frontier models, and then go to work taking its best crack at it. So if you can think of the original examples we were looking at, that were more about telling it what to do. Few shot is about giving examples of what to do. This is how you train AI to match your workflow for that particular session. And it's especially powerful for tables and templates and writing styles and data formats where you can't really describe it, and just giving it the example is much quicker than trying to describe it. You want to watch for things because it might get it wrong, right? Watch for things like when it comes back, did it give you the exact columns you were looking for? Did it give you the consistent formatting you were hoping for? Did it give the same level of detail per item? Are the price ranges and availability info that you asked it to give you the same? These are all things that will help you understand what you might need to improve about your prompt the next time. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about a really powerful way that you can use an LLM to improve the accuracy by making AI show its step-by-step thinking on a particular question. So for this, we're going to use what's called chain of thought reasoning. Now, when you do a chain of thought reasoning prompt, what it's going to do is it's going to, just as before, give it the persona, right? The and then it's going to frame it more. If you frame your question more as a hypothetical, or perhaps prompt as more of a, this isn't me, but it's for someone else, Um, this can kind of open up some opportunities to then make this less about me and more general. So a beginner asks, "Can I can peaches in a regular mason jars I found at a thrift store?" So this is where we're going to really challenge the LLM to show its work. So before answering, think through what makes a jar safe for canning. What are the risks of used jars? What should the person check before using them? What's the safest recommendation? And then show your reasoning for each point and then provide your final answer. So with this prompt, we are going to get exactly that. It's going to tell us what makes a jar safe for canning, and it's going to tell us. We're forcing it to think through this. Remember, when you put a prompt into an LLM, it is nothing more than autocomplete. If you have it think things through within that session, it's going to reference back on itself every time it goes back to generate the next character. So, what risks of used jars? Primary risk is stress, and it gives you all the reasons. What should a person check before using them? If you decide to use thrifted jars, you must perform a Masonic physical. Wow, I didn't even know that existed. Sounds amazing. All right, so it gives you all these tests you can run. What's the safest recommendation? While thrift jars are acceptable if they're name brand mason jars in pristine condition, the safest recommendation for the beginner is to use new jars for the first few batches. This eliminates one major variable if the seal fails or jar breaks. So we basically forced it to think it through, show its work, and by doing that, it's incorporating its work into its final answer, which is, "Welcome to the world of preserving." The short answer is yes, but only if they are authentic canning jars and passed a strict inspection. So there you go. You've got your answer. You've got some further tips. You forced it to think it through to answer what could have been a pretty mediocre response. But by having it show its work, it's forced to consider what you've asked it to think through before providing that final answer in that same thread. So finally, I want to get into self-critique and iteration next. What does that mean? This is where you want to have AI evaluate and improve its own responses. So we're getting into a little bit more advanced territory here, but AI can actually identify gaps and strengthen its answers when prompted to self-review. So we could start with our first prompt being pretty basic. You're a master food preserver. Explain the water bath canning process for peaches in 200 words, and it does that. Notice that we've given it a specific limitation of 200 words, and that's by design because we're going to now have it improve this. So it's given us an answer. It's even asked us, "Hey, would you like me to calculate the exact processing time for your specific altitude?" Well, after reading this, we might want to go, all right, I have some questions, and this is our opportunity to plug in our questions. Review your previous answer and identify any safety information that was missing or unclear, steps that might confuse a beginner, technical terms that need definition, and then provide an improved version that addresses these gaps. This self-critique and iteration approach here, where we're asking it to essentially go back and kind of double check itself, should give us a much more refined response than what we got previously. Missing safety information. I didn't mention jar inspection. Of course, confusing steps. The term fingertip tight is the most common cause of seal failure for beginners. If it's too tight, air can't escape. Too loose, and the lid falls off. Wow, that's important stuff, especially if you're a beginner. So by challenging it, we are challenging it to expose its own weaknesses. And this is important, especially with something high stakes like canning. Now, at this point, it's going to provide, as we asked it to, an improved version that incorporates what it just figured out that were weaknesses in its original version. This is actually pretty good at this point. Our first response was adequate, but it had its gaps. And then our second response self-identified those weaknesses and strengthened its safety language and clarified these confusing things and defined some technical terms that it hadn't before. This is important because AI can be its own editor with the right prompt, right? It doesn't necessarily need a human to always check its work. Sometimes it just needs to be challenged to go back and work a little harder. So this is a two-step process. You generate your original answer, and then you have it critique and improve itself. Now, I use this all the time, especially with some of the analytics work that I'm doing with software as a service support tickets, where sometimes the answers I get back, I'm like, why don't you think through that a little further? I think you could do better. And by golly, it can do that. It's going to work really well with things like writing and coding and analysis, lesson planning, pretty much anything. And then you become the quality control supervisor. Let me say that again. You become the quality control supervisor, right? You're not the editor. You're letting the large language model do what it does well, language, and you are providing the quality control. This is really important because in the end of the day, anything that you put into a large language model, get output out of, and then pass along to someone else or take action on, you're responsible for it, not the large language model provider. So it's really important that you take as many steps as possible to make sure that the information that you're providing or using is as complete as possible. Okay? Multiple iterations of this, by the way, compound the improvements. I could go through this process a few more times, and I'm going to get even more improvements if I go, hey, well, what other safety information is missing? What other steps could confuse a beginner? What other technical terms need definition? At some point, though, you start to see some things repeat or some things that are completely nonsensical, admittedly. But if you exhaust those things, you are much less likely to have high-risk sorts of issues with the answer you have in front of you, perhaps whatever steps or data charts, tables, information is less likely to be inaccurate or otherwise misleading. So you want to watch for really specific self-identified gaps, right? This process should figure out, hey, there are some gaps, right? It can't be perfect. We know that. The meaningful improvements in that second prompt should be there. The beginner-friendly clarification should be there. Technical terms should be really well defined at that point. If you've done your job, you've told the AI to check its work, it's going to do a good job. Okay, so we've gone through a lot of examples here, and I'm going to provide down in the description a list of just the basic templates that you can use that essentially are the templates I've used for everything we've been looking at here for canning peaches. You can use these same templates for almost anything, and they're a great starting point to get really good answers out of a large language model. Remember, large language models and AI in general is probabilistic. It's not deterministic. It's not going out and looking things up in a database. It's autocomplete on steroids. It is looking at everything that it has told you so far, and it is using that to make the next thing that it tells you. It has no idea what's going to say from one letter to the next. Okay? It is very much happening in, as you're watching it come out onto the screen, you notice how it kind of streams through. That's the speed in which it is processing that and doing that autocomplete work. So use these templates as a starting point and fine tune them. And admittedly, what you'll find is, particularly for things that you aren't going to be doing only one time, but things that you're going to use continuously, it can be very powerful to get those prompts really well dialed in and able to do much more than even what's in these templates. Again, these are just a starting point. So take these home and try this out with you. Plant a vegetable garden for beginners. Learn basic Learning basic car maintenance. Understanding my home internet setup. Pick a hobby you want to learn and maybe run through all 8 stages, right? Go through all these and then compare the answer you got in that first stage 1 prompt with the answer you got over in stage 8. You're going to see a huge difference and a much better answer once you get to stage 8. All right, that's all I've got for today. I really appreciate you joining me for this walkthrough of how to use large language models. Very practical, hands-on. I hope you've been following along and trying these out with your own prompts. Go ahead and grab these prompt templates from the description and tell me what you think in the comments. What would you like to see next in my AI 102 class that I'll be working on next? Thanks for watching and have a wonderful rest of your day.